Requiem aeterna.
Hi there, this is Brent.
And this is Amanda,
We are the Unreliable Narrators.
here to talk about the strangeness, the mystery, and the wonder of Gene Wolfe's prose.
What is time?
What is memory?
What is a person?
Is this reality?
Where are we?
Do we exist?
Have you ever considered that all your choices are what brought you right here to this very moment?
Episode number 18. Mary Beatrice Smoot Friarly, SPV, from Bibliomen. First published in the Cheap Street Limited Edition, 1984, and then later republished in an expanded version by Broken Mirrors Press, October 1995.
This one feels a little bit more like a story.
Yeah, so unlike some of the recent Bibliomen, as we're getting started with this collection, this one feels fuller. Maybe it's just because it's longer. 7, 8 pages?
So, Mary Beatrice Smoot Friarly, SPV.
Yes, that's quite the title, and quite a person's name.
She was born on Easter Sunday, 1925, which would have been April 12th.
You did the research?
Yeah, in New Canaan, Massachusetts. So her mother delayed birth until the clock said it was past midnight to ensure an Easter birth. However, her mother wanted a boy, so didn't raise her well. She took orders in the Sisters of Perpetual Vigilance and taught 4th grade. She collected cookbooks over the years, and she gets a visit from the devil one night because he needs help cooking one of the souls in hell.
Yes.
She journeys with him to see the difficult case and finds a Native American stoically accepting the torments of hell. The devil leaves for an interruption, and she takes his hand and crosses herself, which brings them back to Earth. The people of New Canaan decide he's a Micmac Indian and is either given or assumes the name Man on Fire. He and Sister Mary spend the time talking on the park bench, and she begins compiling a book on Indian recipes.
Yeah, that's quite the story.
Yeah. So that's the general summary. I guess we can just... I have notes on her name here. As you pointed out, it's quite a name.
Yes, it is. What are your notes? Mary, I think we all know where that comes from.
Yeah, so Mary, that's the mother of Jesus. I have the note here, Luke, first chapter of the Gospel of Luke, where the angel Gabriel shows up, says to her, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." This disturbs her.
I feel like we could spend an episode or 17 just on the name of Mary. For those of our listeners who are not deeply familiar with Christian theology, or if you think you're familiar with Christian theology, but you didn't grow up in either the Roman Catholic or the Orthodox traditions, the significance of the name Mary might seem somewhat less. Who is it that sings Mary, Did You Know? What is that song?
You're asking me a pop
I
Christmas.
know. So there's a pop Christmas song, Mary, Did You Know? And if the extent of your familiarity with Mary is sort of like the sweet nativity scene image of a young woman who just had a baby, then maybe the weight and significance of her name will pass you by. And you're like, oh, look, she's named after Jesus's mother. But theologically, especially in the oldest Christian traditions, Mary's significance is, I'm going to say huge, but I don't think huge even begins to cover it. She's the Queen of Heaven. She's the Theotokos. She's the mother of God. She is the one who bore God. She is the one who bore the word. She is the one who reverses the curse of Eve. There's no way to begin to describe the significance of the name. Also, incredibly common name in monastic circles. So, I don't know. Take it how you will.
Beatrice, this is Blessed One. The English name is from the French. This is once again a play on Mary, because in some of the translations, Gabriel's like, "Blessed art thou among women." Ultimately, it comes from the Latin, and it means voyager or traveler.
Yeah, and also has a pretty profound significance in Western culture, given that it's the name of Dante's beloved from the Divine Comedy. She's the one that sends Virgil as a messenger to Dante to rescue him from his depression, which is what launches him on his journey through hell, which seems significant here, and then purgatory and into heaven. Again, a figure of incredible importance in Western and Christian culture.
Good call out on that. So, Smoot.
Yeah, what about Smoot?
Well, this could be several things.
All right, what did you find?
So it could be the height of Oliver R. Smoot.
Yeah, I saw that.
So he was made to lay on the Harvard Bridge to measure it as an MIT fraternity prank. I'm going to guess that one's probably not it.
I do like that, though, as an idea, mostly because I have a very short sibling, and her height, which is about 5'1", is 1 Quinn, which is her nickname, and 1 Quinn high was a unit of measure, a jocular unit of measure for a long time in our lives.
So the second possible one, which kind of sent me into an existential spiral. So it's a British slang for somebody who's a casual printer, works for a printer casually. And once I found that, I was like, oh, are we missing a whole layer of Bibliomen here? Or is there slang words from historic printing terminology slipped in?
Did it send you back to re-research things we'd already discussed?
Yes, but not quite as far down the rabbit hole as I could go.
Okay.
So the third thing that it could be is it's a small opening in a dry stacked stone wall to allow livestock to go through. And that one could also be meant because I think in English it's most popularly like the wicket gate, narrow is the way.
Right.
And John Bunyan uses that in Pilgrim's Progress.
Which would be a distinctive Christian connection here.
And then that goes back to Gospel of Matthew in chapter 7. So the next one, Friarly, this one actually is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, what is it?
Of or relating to a friar.
Yeah, and a friar is?
In Latin, it means brother.
Yeah, so a member of a monastic order.
And something to point out from that's contextually probably important to the story, the homophones.
Yes.
Friar.
Yes, as in frying, as in fire, as in this is a nun who collects cookbooks and rescues someone from hell because they were not being cooked properly.
It also has a book printing history behind it.
And what's that?
It's a white or pale patch on a printed page caused by the poor inking when they blotted the ink onto the typeface.
Okay. That one I did not find, so.
Yeah, and then I guess there's another. So monk in printing slang could be like a little ink blot that's isolated by itself.
Oh, that's interesting.
So This is why I said I started having existential crises.
Everything we've ever recorded about everything is wrong because we didn't go deep enough?
It could be.
Okay.
Then we have the end there, the SPV.
Mm-hmm. The Sisters of Perpetual Vigilance.
Yeah, so I found two. There's the obvious, and then there's the somewhat less obvious. So there doesn't seem to be an actual order, but it seems to be a fictional one based off the parable of the 10 virgins.
Yes.
And they have their oil lamps, and they're waiting for the bridegroom.
And there are those that did not replenish their oil and those that did.
Yeah. And the ones that did not replenish their oil, they're the foolish ones. And
yes.
The listeners can find that in Gospel of Matthew 25. There's another possible meaning here.
Okay.
And I may be way off base, but the way the story plays out, maybe, because it has a special purpose vehicle or a special purpose entity where it's corporate and legal speak for creating new entities where you can shuffle assets or money into to protect different parts of the corporation.
Okay.
And
we're shuffling souls into the SPV?
We're shuffling souls and we're shuffling books around.
Yep.
And then we have the devil and a nun working together. So I don't know. Maybe it's there. Maybe I'm overreading.
I've never felt like overreading Gene Wolfe is a big risk, but if we get there. All right, so we've made it through her name.
Yeah.
And that's it. I don't know how many minutes in we are, but that's not very far. All right, so she's born in New Canaan, Massachusetts. Back east somewhere.
Yeah. Obviously, the land of Canaan from the Old Testament.
For sure.
The promised land.
That seems too obvious to carry too much significance. It just is, a biblical name.
Yeah.
And also pretty common in Puritan country.
Yes.
Yeah, born on Easter because her mother, Martha Smoot Friarly, made special effort to not deliver her until after the clock struck midnight. Is there any significance, Brent, about the name Martha, especially in conjunction with the name Mary?
There is a Mary and a Martha in the Gospels.
Yeah, and a bit of a story about their life. Two sisters, they also had a brother, kind of a famous brother since he died and was resurrected. That's Lazarus, for those of you who are following along at home. And they had a very famous conflict. And it was that Martha was very intent on making sure that the hospitality was cared for as Jesus and his disciples were in her house. And she was indignant that her sister wasn't helping her. And as someone who's put on many a holiday meal, I think having somebody help you with the food is an important part of life. But Jesus corrects Martha and tells her that Mary has chosen the better thing, which is to sit at his feet and listen.
Yeah. With Mary and Martha, I think we definitely should be keeping that in mind there.
Yes. And is it too quick to jump to Mrs. Friarly and Mary Beatrice's relationship? Because I feel like this is a very interesting elision on Wolfe's part.
Don't think it's too quick.
Okay. Well, that she was hoping for a boy. She did not, however, proceed to raise little Beatrice like one, but like nothing on earth, which goes unexplained.
Yeah, I kind of puzzled over that one.
Yeah, because all we get is, paragraph later, we get Father O'Murphy trying to find a place for her because it would at least get her out of her mother's house. So clearly Father O'Murphy felt that whatever Mary Beatrice's childhood was, it was not a good one.
Yeah, and joining those two together. So if it's like nothing on earth, I was like, well, could be heaven or it could be hell.
Yes, these are our two options.
Yeah, but with Father O'Murphy's comment about at least it would get her out of the house, I'm guessing that she was raised rather poorly, treated like a devil.
Yeah, that seems about right. But Mary Beatrice has a vocation of her own because she shows up at Father O'Murphy's door believing she has a vocation and concluding that her vocation was real.
Yeah.
Whatever her motivation was, at least narratively, it is rooted in some kind of actual calling.
Yeah, so she is called a year later after she shows up at the door into the Sisters of Perpetual Vigilance. And she takes vows and she begins to teach fourth grade.
Having taught fourth grade, I felt a connection to this character.
Well, she's teaching at the school of St. Apollos, the Persuasive.
And I think she taught it longer than the 2 years I managed.
Fourth grade's not easy.
I don't think so.
So we have another New Testament connection here.
Yes.
So Apollos, he was a first century Jewish Christian who was known as an eloquent speaker.
Yes.
He worked with Priscilla and Aquila, and also Paul.
Yeah, so strong connection to Paul, as there's the verse that mentions there's a conflict in the church between people who claim they are followers of Paul and people who claim they are followers of Apollos. And Paul is severe with them for creating that division.
Yeah, rather indignant about it. So it's after she begins teaching that a student's family gives her a tattered old cookbook.
Yes.
And that's what starts her collecting impulse.
Yeah, so she starts collecting cookbooks. And there are a lot of different book collecting impulses in the world. I don't know if anyone in this room has ever experienced that, or any of our listeners have, but the cookbook collecting impulse is an interesting one to me.
Is it? Because while I do enjoy collecting books, I've
noticed.
Yeah, I've never got to the point where I was like, boy, I need to branch out into cookbooks.
No, that's why it's interesting to me, because so cookbook collecting is a fairly old-fashioned impulse in my perception. I tend to think of it as something that made some kind of sense before the advent of the internet, because there are approximately 1 quadrillion, gazillion, I don't know, whatever number we want to pretend here, ways to make things. And you can have 47 different recipes for a tarte tatin, or for chocolate cake, or for a roasted tenderloin. And each one of those iterations has its own strengths and weaknesses. And before you could search the internet and get that many recipes along with feedback and rankings, having a large collection of cookbooks kind of made sense, because if you wanted to cook anything interesting or innovative and didn't have the confidence of that base knowledge like a chef has, or a very experienced home cook has, many, many different recipes could make sense. Now, it just seems like so much dead weight because that's a lot of shelf space. Every cookbook is big, it's heavy. The paper tends to be heavy. There are pictures, indices, all kinds of things. And beyond 2 or 3 basic cookbooks, or maybe 10 if you're feeling adventurous, it doesn't seem necessary to have cookbooks anymore if you have an internet connection.
No, I'll agree with that. My perception of people who collect cookbooks is largely informed by my grandmother and great-grandmother's, like, great aunt's generations.
Yeah, and it does seem to be very much that generation, which is also the generation of not sharing recipes, which is something I'm philosophically opposed to. If you have a good recipe, you are morally obligated to share it. But, I don't have strong opinions about anything.
So I guess there's a section in here where it talks about how, because of her station, she's only ever able to collect the cheapest of them.
But she has a lot of time, so she can hunt out copies of things that are affordable. And she has lots of connections because her students tend to remember her fondly.
Yeah. So this comes to a head where she is going to sleep one night.
Yes.
And there's the other 2 sisters are there, and they're already asleep. And it says, then it came to her, she could not say how, that Sister Evangelica and even Sister Bruno slept on, and would go on sleeping though the knocking continued all night, that they could not hear it and would never hear it.
Yeah, so she has some supernatural or dream sense that this is a knocking that's just for her, knocking at the door. Because she thought they should open the door for her because they're younger.
Yep.
So she's at an advanced age at this point.
Yeah. So then she goes to open the door, and we get this rather comical scene.
Yes, we have rain falling and a short, dark man with the rain coming off of him in steam.
Yeah, he says, shalom.
Which is quite striking.
Yeah, and that's a Jewish greeting.
Which means peace, yeah.
Peace. And so she replies back, peace, shalom, and then he steps across the threshold.
Yeah, and shalom is a really interesting word because it's not just peace, like peace be with you. It carries a lot of theological significance. And I don't want to overread this just because I happen to have read Nicholas Wolterstorff's When Justice and Peace Embrace. But if you do have the time to read Nicholas Wolterstorff's When Justice and Peace Embrace, he spends a lot of time unpacking the word shalom, and that it is a sense of peace that comes not just from a cessation of conflict or an ending of conflict, but from a total resolution of conflict. So it's a word that has a lot of significance in the idea that something has been solved or resolved. And so it's not just saying, hey, how you doing? There's some weight here, as this dark man that the rain steams off of says shalom.
And that makes sense. I know a lot of Bible translators choose to leave that word untranslated just because they don't want to give people an incorrect perception of the meaning when they're reading.
Because it's particularly freighted and does not have a simple one-to-one translation.
Yeah. And so when he steps across the threshold, he says, and I mean it, I come in peace. I'm coming in answer partly to your prayers.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so she responds back, you mean my prayers have only helped to condemn me? I'd hoped for more, but I'm sure the sentence is just, and I'm ready to obey it.
Okay, I'm ready to go off on quite a tangent here, so I don't know if you're ready to go with me.
Yeah, sure, let's go.
Okay, Saint Siluan the Athonite is a Russian Orthodox saint who very, very famously prayed for 14 years to have a revelation of God's mercy. And he felt afflicted by devils the entire time he prayed. And he had a vision of God that told him that was because he was prideful. And so he said, so how do I get rid of my pride? And the Lord told him, hold your mind in hell, but do not despair. And so he was an illiterate saint. And so his teachings have been written down by other people. But his teaching was basically that he could consciously wish that even if it meant that he was condemned to hell, if the world could be saved. And so in Orthodox theology, it's the one man lost idea that a saint is someone who could wish for the salvation of others and pray for the salvation of others, even if the price of that was their loss, which is obviously the taking on of Christ's sacrifice, or the attempt to imagine themselves or imaginatively inhabit Christ's passion, that he died for us. And so when I read this passage, and this is probably not what Gene Wolfe had in mind, but I was just reading a bunch of Orthodox theology and philosophy. So this was in my head, that she said, my prayers have only helped to condemn me. I hoped for more, but I'm sure the sentence is just. There's an affirmation in here of total surrender. If I'm condemned to hell, then it's a just sentence. I am so identified with God's justice that even if God's justice condemned me, I would accept it, which of course then is the saving space.
I don't know if Wolfe had that in mind. However, it dovetails so well with the story.
I don't think he had to have had it in mind for it to actually be a true interpretation. And this is where I'm showing my hand as my overarching Wolfe interpretation theory is that he's inhabiting the universe that we live in. He didn't create a separate one. And so if this makes sense in the real world, it makes sense in Wolfe's world. But anyway, that's where I went with that she is so radically identified with God. She has so devoted herself as a sister of perpetual vigilance that she would be okay with being condemned if that was God's justice.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So there's a exchange here after he comes in and he's like, oh, can I smoke? Will it bother you? Like, no, not at all.
He began to smoke, mostly from the groin, but a good deal from the hands and the top of the head.
Yeah. And then there's a part of what he says is the answer to her prayer. And it's like, you've prayed to behold an angel. Your exact words were, quote, the least of your messengers, Lord, would be sufficient for me, end quote. And so Satan's like, behold, I'm an angel and not the least of his messengers.
Which technically correct man or technically correct devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is, I think you're drawing out something here where this is a humorous exchange, but there's some hedging in the devil's wording because he's like, I'm here partly in answer to prayer.
Yes. So we're not supposed to take this as definitely a divine intervention, but as some combination of effects.
Yeah. And so he says, I'm the archangel in charge of punishments. That's all. Sure, I've had a lot of bad press.
Please don't say it's a dirty job, but somebody had to do it. Sister Mary gathered her bathrobe more tightly about her.
So there's the question there. Satan's hedging what he's saying. So is he actually the archangel in charge of punishments, or is he putting a different spin on it? That's all. Sure, I've had a lot of bad press in the sense that, like, well, it's negative press. It's inaccurate. So.
Right. And he definitely acts as a hostile witness here because she asks, then you're saying you're not really evil after all? And he responds with a question. If I were evil, would I come here to ask you to do good? That's not an answer.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out because I marked that too. He did not actually answer her question.
Exactly.
So there's enough in the exchange that I think we are, even though he's being played comically, there's still an undercurrent here.
Yeah. And then we have the odd little exchange about him being Jewish, which he used the Jewish word for peace, shalom. But then that doesn't seem to get unpacked. He said, if I wasn't Jewish, could I cut the kind of deals that I do? Which, playing into a stereotype here, we're all Jewish. Gabriel, Michael, everybody. Everybody?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's several things that it could be.
Yes.
And I'm hesitant to go too far out because, like you said, it's not really unpacked because where he says everybody, then there's a bit of is that like everybody is God's chosen people?
Right.
There's also possibly a joke in there about Jewish humor, about God's humor is Jewish humor.
Right.
And I'm not sure. And I'm slightly unwilling to.
I almost didn't know if I wanted to say anything about it because it feels like on a very superficial level. There's a semi-insensitive or semi-racist joke here, but it doesn't read or unpack like one. First of all, this is the devil talking.
Yeah.
And he's just proved to us that he's unreliable. Weird. I can't imagine an unreliable narrator. But anyway, and then he also then says that all of the best angels are Jewish, but then he's equating himself with the best angels here. So it's so origamied together. I'm not sure what's coming out here, except that I like what you said about, is God's sense of humor Jewish? That seems the kind of thing that Wolfe might be getting at.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to say, now you'll say I don't look Jewish. And she's like, well, yeah, you don't. And then that kind of falls apart and then goes away and doesn't seem to come back.
Yeah. So she says, I thought you'd come to tempt me. Lucifer rubs his hands and he says, I have.
So he declares this to be a temptation.
Yes, but it's supposed to be like a good one.
Yeah.
And he's coming to acknowledge her meager cookbook collection.
Yeah. That's all packed up in the attic.
Yeah. So, and there's an exchange where he's like, oh, yeah, I know you have the best. He's checked everybody else's cookbook collection out and no, it's hers.
Yeah.
And he needs help with spiritual or mystical dishes.
Yeah, like how to make sacramental wine, for instance. And then she says, you can hardly expect me to tell you that. So she's going to keep the secret from him,
Yeah.
which seems reasonable.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, I know. I was just for instancing.
Right.
So she says, certainly. And it says she replied with some pride. And so I think we're supposed to get the impression that he has stoked her ego a little bit.
Yeah,
here.
you have the best cookbook collection and you know how to make great things, mystical and spiritual dishes like sacramental wine. And she's like, well, yeah, I know how manna was baked.
Mm-hmm.
And then she talks about broth simmered in the cauldron of Caradwyn. Did you look that up?
I did. So that's either an enchantress or a goddess from Wales folklore. And so she had a cauldron where she had a potion of wisdom where it had to boil in there for a year and a day. And then there's a series of comical errors that come from the servant trying to portion it out. And so that was a story cycle that was told.
Hipsters in their bone broth only wish they had a year and a day worth of soup. All right, so then he has a dish that he doesn't know how to cook. He's boiled it, he's baked it, he's roasted it, but nothing helps. Will you have a look and see if you can help me out? Don't answer right off. Let me say that you won't find my kitchen an unpleasant place at all. You won't get burned or anything like that. And what I'm trying to do, this is orders from on top. You understand. You want to help him out, don't you? And him and on top are both capitalized.
Yeah, so the implication is God. So when Sister Mary responds, yes, because she's helping God.
Yes, and also because maybe her pride has been a little stoked.
Mm-hmm. And so they immediately, then they're surrounded by flames. And it doesn't say here, but Lucifer comments. He's like, hey, don't be so panicky. Didn't I say you wouldn't get hurt? And the response is, it's just that it happened all so fast.
Yes.
To which the devil replies, I like running the toll gates, a little hobby of mine. And so I think that's a joke with
yes,
where they put the coins over the eyes. I think
yes, to pay the passage over the River of the Dead, the River Styx.
Yeah. So I think that's what he's joking there, like because he teleported instead of actually.
Right.
So this would be different than Dante's journey.
Yeah, rather significantly different, because that takes a few cantos of the Divine Comedy to get them even into hell.
There's the devil's naked, she's naked.
Yeah, she's naked and she's apparently 18 again. And the devil comments that she's very nice looking. So this is a little awkward. We have a naked nun in hell.
Yep. And the reason is that she's 18 is she's the age. Everybody is their age to give everybody else the most pain to notice when they're naked. So
yeah. So she's maximally attractive. Is this what we're going for?
I think that's what
I think that's the implication of the text.
Yeah. And then she asks for her clothes back. The devil's like, okay. And he teleports them to hell, and her clothes burn up, and the coat hanger that they were on, it just instantly melts away.
Yeah, so clothing's not going to help her.
Yeah. And then the devil's comments like, look, everybody is naked here.
Yeah, and then she comments, yeah, but your hair is more strategically placed and more plentiful.
Uh-huh.
So it's awkward.
Yep. And then there's a commentary on, I didn't know hell was this crowded. And then there's the devil explains that's all based off of perception. So if you dislike having a lot of people around, it seems crowded. If you like having a lot of people around you, it seems very sparsely populated.
So I guess we're getting a preview here of what hell would be like for us if we have to go.
Yeah. And then this is where they
encounter the case, the situation. He is supposed to be cooking this person, the soul, who has red skin. He's tall and muscular. And I fried, I've chopped, I've boiled, and just look, that's agony.
Yeah. And he has an emotionless face, and he's just there.
Well, he certainly isn't smiling, Sister Mary said.
He isn't anything. I work my tush off.
I love how the devil is polite swearing here.
Yeah. And then he says, but does he give one damn? Hell no.
Oh, damn and hell. Mm.
Yeah. But in the context, it's a passport and a place.
Yes.
And so he tells her, you're the expert. You're going to tell me what should I do.
Yeah. You think marinating might help? I've tried it. Sulfuric acid.
And then This section of paragraphs is, I think, somewhat key because this is where things, in my opinion, get turned on their head a bit.
Yeah, we get a little interruption.
Yeah, it starts that interruption. It says, as if on cue, a Dickens appeared.
Yeah, what's that?
Okay, so Dickens is a minced oath version of saying what the devil. So it's like a devil appeared. And so the reason you would mince oaths is because you didn't want to actually invoke the devil's name, but you either saw or heard something that you were like, oh, what the devil, but it's like what the Dickens. Actually has nothing to do with Charles Dickens, which
would be funny, but
yeah. That being said, this is Wolfe, so I'm sure that he just compressed and laminated that idea together. But the one thing, it's as if on cue. So it's calling out that something else is going on here. And
there seems to be some other director of this play calling the cues.
Yeah. It says, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The chairman says, so where is he? So this one, it took me a little bit to unpack. So the devil's saying this message is from, and then we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so those are the three patriarchs that God made the covenants with. It was reiterated over the generations. So then God gets called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to bring people back to the memories of the covenants that were made. And then, so this is Moses uses this when he comes to the people in Egypt, and he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent me. And then Jesus uses this when he's arguing with the Sadducees, because he uses this as a kind of a, well, they have to still be alive because God is the God of the living, not the dead. So if he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then they still need to be alive, which the Sadducees did not believe in an afterlife. It has the chairman capitalized, which I am assuming it means God here.
I mean, I think that's a safe assumption. It's just interesting implications here.
Yeah. So where is he? Which I assume we're talking about Man on Fire.
So where is he?
Yeah. And the devil says, it's line 7. I should tell him out to lunch?
Question mark.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how you read it's line 7. I don't know if it's like prompt, like somebody forgot their line in like one of the devils, or
right.
And then is the Dickens, the little devil covering where it says, should I tell him out to lunch? Because it seems like something didn't quite go exactly right.
Yeah, not according to plan.
Yeah, and the devil's response is, get out of here, you schmuck.
Okay, well, there's that Jewishness coming around again.
Mm-hmm. And Lucifer makes a little bow, and he says, I got to go. Look him over, okay? I'll be right back.
Yeah, so the devil has to leave. Lucifer has to leave. And then Sister Mary is left there next to this tall, muscular man who is too stoic to be tortured.
Yeah, and I think there's a line in he knows what I'm going to do, you know. He knows exactly what I'm going to do.
I find that encouraging, exciting, and disturbing. The universe is not as we thought.
Yeah. So there's some connections with, I don't know whether to bring these up right now or.
Go for it.
Okay. So there's some connections in some other Wolfe works. And I was thinking of The Detective of Dreams.
Okay.
And there's nobody in that story has actual names. So there's the one guy who he's dreaming about the leathery reptilian hand, that it's the servants that are in the house. He's also a servant in the house. And it's like he's forgotten that they live down in the cellar, but each night he has the dream, the door opens a little bit more and he sees more and more of the arm. And then there's also one of the other things I was thinking about was with Severian. And I couldn't
An
find...
obscure Wolfe character.
Yeah. I couldn't find the exact quote that I kind of remembered in my mind, but there's one where he's talking with the Pellerines, and it's talking about the plant. Part of it grows up and there's flowers and leaves,
Right.
and then the other part tunnels down where no light is, but it's down in the darkness, and it gives the whole thing strength. And Severian thinks she's talking about good and evil, but she responds, "Was I speaking of good and evil?" And she views the whole stock as the same thing. And then there's another later on in the Sword of the Lictor. So I think I compressed these two sections together, but
in your memory.
Yeah, so it may be that all those who seek to serve the theophany, and perhaps even all those who allege to serve him, though they appear to us to differ so wildly and indeed to wage a species of war upon one another, are yet linked.
Which is a thread through other Wolfe stories. I mean, we already discussed West Wind and its connection to The Man Who Was Thursday, which is very much the sense that even those who are attempting to thwart good end up serving the good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the universe is not as we thought. The red-skinned man nodded slow assent. He agrees.
Or perhaps this is not the universe at all, she said, just a corner of a bad dream.
Right.
But I know how to end it. Take my left hand.
My hand burn you, the red-skinned man grunted. He extended it nevertheless, and when she clasped it, it did not. It was a man's hand, living and strong.
She held it and knew she had lived her entire life for this moment, and that it had been worth it. So she makes a sign of the cross.
Yes.
And they are both now back on Earth.
Yeah, she wakes up, and there appears in New Canaan, where her convent is, a tall, swarthy man whom the people of the town have decided is a Micmac Indian. He does very little work, and sometimes he drinks too much, but he does no harm either, which is much the same as not working, which is pretty great. And he is very strong, so they leave him alone.
Yeah. So this could all be a dream, except for the fact that the man is now in town with her. And I like how they just decide that
it's the determination of the people.
He's a Micmac Indian. And it ends with her, she no longer looks 18, and she still slaps the boy's fingers with her ruler. But one of the things that changes is that Man on Fire,
who's this supposed Micmac Indian.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's given that name or if that's a name he takes on himself, but Man on Fire, he sleeps out on one of the park benches, and then she goes out and speaks with him. But they speak low enough that nobody can ever hear what they're talking about.
Yeah, and she justifies her action to the Monsignor, who is Father O'Murphy, who originally heard her vocation, that she is compiling a volume of Indian recipes. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah. So it's an odd one.
No, not Wolfe.
The threads that are in it, it's very much that things are larger than we ever imagined. And it's like in the Severian quote that I pulled out there, where the Pellerine isn't dismissing good and evil, but she's just saying, was I speaking of good and evil? And this is where I was thinking that the SPV, so it can be Sisters of Perpetual Vigilance, or it could be that special purpose vehicle.
Right.
Because the devil brings her, and she's absolutely aware that he knows that she's going to cross herself and take Man on Fire out. But that seems to be part of the, I can't do anything with him.
Right. So then it feels like the devil is working with God to save a soul from hell, but it also could be that the devil doesn't want a soul in hell that can't be in torment. And Man on Fire can't suffer because Man on Fire doesn't have the evil in him that would make him at home. And to be at home in hell is to be suffering in hell? I don't know.
I don't either. And then it just makes me question, like, why'd the devil bring him to hell in the first place?
This seems to fit with sort of the pluralist versus universalist kind of interpretations of the afterlife. Like, is there more than one path to heaven? Or you haven't joined to the church on earth, then you can't go to heaven? Or is there some set of layered possibilities where salvation is available through things that we can't currently conceive of, but Man on Fire, he doesn't belong in hell. He clearly doesn't belong in hell. And therefore, the devil has to get him out because it's having someone there that's not suffering. Does that not then destroy the entire conceit of hell?
And to your point with the pluralist and universalist, and I like how Wolfe sidesteps or steps between both of them or goes with the third option. Because in one sense, you can argue if he actually is a Micmac Indian and he lived before Christianity was brought to the New World, then it's, if you take the fundamentalist approach, it's like, yeah, he's going to hell. And that's where he ends up. But then the orders on high, he gets out of hell, is brought back to earth, but now he's attached
to a nun who's talking to him.
Man's ways are not God's ways, is the way I kind of...
Yeah, the sense of humor here is a little convoluted for our sense of humor, but we're all going to laugh.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot else on this. Do you have anything else you'd like to...
I just enjoyed this story. I don't know if that's ever happened before where I've enjoyed a Wolfe story, but no, I really liked this character. 20 characters waiting for a book. Really is a fairly complete story in some sense.
Yes.
I would like to follow Sister Mary Beatrice Smoot Friarly, SPV's adventures throughout time and space, because I have a feeling she's going to collect lots of friends in different ways and have lots of conversations with them. The Unreliable Narrators are Amanda Patchen and Brent Towle. And, as Gene Wolfe said, we think that we know a man or woman when so much of what we know is actually that man's or that woman's situation, his or her place on the board of life. Move the pawn to the last row and see her rise in armor, sword in hand.
Kyrie.